let's get on to the next story of handling conflict. Now, I found this quite interesting. Now, I'm not gonna show the video. I'll just talk about the situation. So there was a senator, a Republican senator called Mark Wayne Mullin, and he challenged Teamsters President Sean O'Brien to a fight during a Senate committee hearing, right? Challenge him to a fist fight. Now, what had happened is President Sean O'Brien had, not president of the country, just president of Teamsters. So let's call him Sean O'Brien then. He had made a tweet or something, having a dig. There I go, using that word again. Having a go or challenging Senator Mark Wayne Mullin to a, it was just, as people would say, boys being boys. But in the Senate hearing, that was just on a tweet. But in the Senate hearing, Senator Mullins stood up, he read out the tweet and he stood up and said, now is a time, now is a place, let's get it on. Now, unfortunately, Bernie Sanders calmed down the situation and we didn't actually see a fist fight, but it was close to. And we'll talk about Bernie Sanders and his interaction before. But Dr. Ron, my question to you is, why is it that we, not so quickly, but why is the default that we resort to violence or threats of violence? Or like if we're discussing something with someone and we don't like their response or whatever, now this is from years of working as a bouncer in nightclubs, right? That as no one can actually communicate about anything. No one talks. Everyone just wants to get into a fight, right? Like the first little thing. Why is it that we resort to violence so much?
I don't know. My PhD's in economics, not human behaviour. I don't know. I don't know why we think that that's an appropriate thing to do. I've got no idea why anybody would ever think that's an appropriate thing to do in the middle of a Senate hearing. I really don't. And I've got no idea why people think it's smart to make those kinds of remarks in the digital public space. It just beggars belief as far as I'm concerned. Look, my training as an economist leads me to believe that people do respond to incentives, and having a camera on you does provide an incentive.
Yes.
And you might see that there is some value in people seeing what you're doing in the midst of a Senate committee hearing. But my real concern from what I saw and from those interactions on X, what kind of example does that set for others to follow? And leadership is about two things. It's about influencing followers, and it's about empowering the people around you to be all that they can be. Yeah. And I just don't see that this helps in either area. I think it's an absolute disgrace, quite frankly, both on the boss of the Teamsters Union for the remarks that he made on X, and for Mark Wayne Mullin for the way in which he behaved in the Senate committee hearing. And I know that a lot of people really would have liked to have seen them fight. And there's a lot of people who think the boys just have to fight and get it out of their system. Yes, but I actually don't think that's true at all.
Let's talk about that for a moment, because now, if you want to see any of the articles that we're talking about or any of the videos, we link them all below. Link to this article, but also I've linked you to put a link to the actual video where Timcast, Tim Poole and the team from Timcast IRL discuss this situation. You can see the video of the senators challenging each other. Yet you mentioned something about channeling the aggression. That was something that was mentioned, like by their podcast of like, oh, you know what, like we do need a positive, a positive. Well, I forget what exactly, but people need to be able to channel their aggression somewhere, and if they're not channeling it, then it just explodes. Now, I know that from personal experience. Sometimes you just bottle things up. You don't respond. You keep it all bottled up. But then one little thing happens, someone drops a glass, or it's like something very trivial, and you explode and you go off about it. That's obviously not healthy either. But is channeling aggression a good idea?
Look, I think in that context, no, it's not a good idea. Not at all. I mean, these are supposed to be responsible people. In the one case, the leader of the Teamsters union is supposed to be setting an example for his followers.
Yeah.
And somebody who sits in the Senate is supposed to be setting an example for the whole nation.
Yeah.
And having a fight on the floor of the Senate doesn't set a good example either for the nation or, dare I say it, for members of the Teamsters union.
Yeah. So I'll go back to my first comment of like what I believe this situation is. People do resort to violence because I feel like they resort to violence because they can't communicate. Now, or they have trouble articulating or trying to communicate what their feelings are. So just default is just go to aggression. I mean, before the podcast, I was talking about my son. He's 3 years old and he's throwing tantrums and stuff like that. He doesn't know how to communicate his feelings and stuff, so he just goes to violence, right? Goes to violent acts and kicks things and whatever. But we as adults, we as leaders, we need to be able to figure out how to be able to communicate our feelings, our emotions, what we want. Because if we just resort to violence, then one of the keys of leadership is communication. Like, you have to be able to communicate well. So if you can't communicate your frustration to your team, how are you meant to communicate the goals, the project, the outcome, the purpose? Like, you need to be good at communication as a leader. You can't just resort to violence. It's not a good view. It's not, it does not a good outlook. And remember, as leaders, people are watching us every moment of the day. They're watching what we post on social media. They're watching how we interact with our kids. They're watching, now, rightly or so, it's like, well, public figures should have a private life. Agreed, right? Like, people should have a private life. But still, in your private life, your family, your friends, the people go to church, everything, they are seeing you interact with people at all moments. And so we are always representing our leadership. And we as leaders need to make sure. Now, we're not perfect and we can fail at times and things like that. Like I was just saying to Dr. Rod before, that there's a moment that I kind of failed as a parent, because I didn't handle a situation properly. We don't always. But remember that we are on view. We're on stage. We're on show as leaders. Everyone's watching us. Even if you're not on social media, even if you're just leader of an organization, your team are watching how you interact with clients, how you handle an issue with a supplier or an issue with an employee. They're watching every interaction. Now, they may not be just staring at you, but they pick up on it, they observe. And so we need to make sure that every one of our actions is something that does still represent who we are and that is consistent with what we want to achieve and what we want to project. And so as leaders, just remember, communicate properly. Don't resort to violence because it's not a good example. Don't resort to threats. That's not good communication as a leader. I did kind of want to talk about Bernie just for a second, Dr. Rod.
Sure.
because it was actually quite interesting because I don't know, like if you don't really follow politics, you've only seen Bernie as this, guy who flies in coach. He thinks everyone should not make money and all that. He's just, you kind of painted as that kind of guy, right? And he was leading this hearing, and it was quite interesting that Senator Mark Wayne Mullin just stood up and tried to challenge the other senator, the president of the union, and Bernie just straight away just went, "Sit down, don't be ridiculous. You're senators." Like pretty much just said, "Grow up, like represent who. Just remember what you're representing." And I thought that was a quite. Because he was stern about it, but he didn't get emotional. He didn't insult anyone. He didn't, he just said, "Hey, remember who you are. You're senators, right?" What is your take on his response in this situation?
Well, I think he was taken by surprise, but under the circumstances, I actually think he did quite well. And, he called them to order. He refused to allow the president of the Teamsters Union to speak out of turn, and he enforced the regulations of Senate committee hearings, and I thought he actually did quite well.
Yeah.
But he was taken by surprise, and so I think that I think he did the right thing, and he did manage to maintain order. Mm-hmm. And of course, in that context, he was the leader because he was chairing the Senate committee hearing, and he managed to de-escalate the situation, I should say, quite successfully.
Yeah.
And I wonder what he might have done if he was half his age. He might have taken them both outside. I don't know, but look, I think he did.
So what you're saying is
well.
we always need a little old man in the room. That's what you're saying?
I don't know about that. Well, you need a wise old man in the room, that's for sure.
Hey, you just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership Podcast. If you like that, hit the like button and put a comment below. Hey, if you want to watch more videos like this, check out our channel, and while you're there, make sure you subscribe.